You're listening to Football Friday Night on demand exclusively on 600 ESPN El Paso. Stay up to date with high school football scores, updates, and news by downloading the free 600 ESPN El Paso mobile app. All right, welcome into the second edition of the Football Friday Night podcast on demand. Adrian Broaddus along with Alex Nicolas. Alex, we took a break last week. We are back in action. Week 3 is here, and it flew by. We know a lot more about some of these teams across the city of El Paso, a little bit more. I feel like we have a really good grasp on some of these teams. You and I were talking about this off air, and this past week we weren't able to go on air for Football Friday Night because of Chihuahuas baseball, because of UTEP football, which ended up being a big dud over the weekend. But we're back here. We're ready to recap Week 3. How's it going, Alex? And I know you were at 2 big games this past weekend.
It's going good, Adrian. Always glad to talk some high school ball with you. 3 weeks in the books pretty much at this point for a majority of our teams here. Starting to get a feel, like you mentioned, of who's who. You see some teams that were desperately needing a win, pull out wins. Teams continuing to roll, and really things are starting to shape up, at least over the first 3 weeks. We kind of see who's off to a strong start, who could be potential district contenders. You got some guys that are out there putting up some early numbers for some MVP-type accolades, all-district-type accolades. So things are starting to roll. No major upsets yet. The season's sort of going along to the prognostics of preseason as far as some of the scheduling. Of course, you never expect Parkton to go 0-3, but that's something that we'll get into, a product of their tough scheduling. So, really starting to get a feel of who's who early on in the season and approaching district play. I know 6A has that big bye week this week, but district play right around the corner, and that's when it really all counts. So it's the season's it's a marathon, not a sprint, and approaching that midway point of it's pretty soon.
Well, let's get right after it. We have the Week 3 recap. We'll go down some of the games from this past week. We'll also talk some 6A playoff predictions in this one. We'll talk some standouts, of course, preview next week ahead. So let's start from our game of the week this past week. It was Riverside Isleta. In this one, you talk about getting off to a great start. How about the Riverside Rangers and head coach Gary Ricoder and what he's been able to do with this Rangers team? I think right now, what they've been showing us has been beyond impressive. And with a 52-27 victory against Isleta, that's a statement victory right there over your rivals. Running back Jose Guardado, the junior, 634 on the ground, 8 rushing touchdowns against Isleta. He had 3 total touchdowns. I'm just going to throw it at you, Alex. Does Riverside have the 10-0 potential this year? Can they go undefeated? Can they run the table? Because the way that they're looking right now, pretty strong.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Talking to some coaches, off record in their own district, everybody's on notice with what Riverside has this year. You talk about Speedy Munoz, Jose Guardado, whether it's in the air, whether they're in the backfield, they have a very, very good chemistry. Guardado, went for 500 yards his first 2 games of the season, and then he goes out and has a quiet 12 carries, 111-yard game. So what you're starting to see now is starting to see their top 2 players really infect their entire team, holding a really explosive, in my opinion, Isleta team to just 27 points. I know that game was going back and forth early on, but to see those adjustments, to see their defense really step up, that's what's really more impressive. And hearing Coach Ricoder's interviews after the game, he gave praise to his whole team. You look at the first 2 games, like I mentioned, where Guardado's just putting up ridiculous video game type numbers, and then you see in the game against a 5A foe at that, where he doesn't have to really explode. He just does his job, and everybody else around him really kind of comes through. You're talking about I'm really more talking about the defense. That's what's most impressive to me about Riverside, is that this team does have the bona fide stars, but you see the little things coming together as a team, and that's what's going to make them really, really tough, particularly in their district. And of course, come playoff time, when you have a defense that can shut down at any point in the game, no matter if you're getting beat up early on in the game, if you can turn that, make those adjustments and turn it around at some point, that can travel. I'm talking about the playoffs. So that's what's more impressive, seeing the way that they're able to handle that game and really turn what I felt early on in that game. I think it was, like I said, it was back and forth, 21, 21, 27, 27. I might be off on that one, but it was really close in the 20s. And then to see Riverside just take it over at that point and stretch that lead to that 45-27 lead when it was pretty much in hand at that point. They won 52-27, but it really speaks to the potential of depth and talent that this 4A team really has in not your typical 4A team, Adrian, that's for sure.
Yeah, not at all. And for Riverside, again, I'm looking at their schedule right now, Alex. 2 weeks from Friday, they'll take on Monahans. That's going to be one of those early interesting tests for this Riverside team. That's probably their biggest challenge, though, when you really look at their schedule. I'm looking at it. I look at Alpine. Then they start district play, of course, against San Eli, Fabens, Mountain View, close the season off against Clint. They have a great chance to try to run the table and go undefeated this year, which would be a remarkable accomplishment for this Riverside group.
It was. I mean, you're looking at where they've been to now. Hadn't beat Ysleta since 2012, I think was the stat that I heard. Obviously moving down to 4A helps with their enrollment, helps them on an even playing field in district play. But, what they did against a 5A school just shows exactly what you're saying. This is a full turnaround. This could be a team that, by the end of the year is sitting that 9-1 plateau, even 10-0, and they have that ability because they have speed. You're looking at the experience now, a lot of juniors on this team that played a lot last year. So, you have some experience starting to show its head, especially in a game like you said, a rivalry game, full house there, and to be able to pull away that they did really shows maturity from that team. That's, really kind of an upstart team under Gary Ricoder. They haven't had success at Riverside. You got to go back to, maybe about a decade ago, where they had some playoff success, and, it's coming back. And then that community down there, they're proud. They're going to show up for the Rangers. And I think, you're looking at this all year long of a team that's going to consistently put up numbers, and it seems that's just going to impress us with the way that they win games this year.
You mentioned consistently putting up numbers. Perfect segue to talk about Eastlake. What can we really say about this team? Head coach Ruben Rodriguez, 3-0 to start off the year. Consistency has been the name of the Falcons game. I mean, they're coming off a 36-13 victory against Parkland. They're outscoring opponents in a significant margin. Granted, they haven't played anybody at the caliber like some of these other 6A teams have faced. I'm talking, Montwood taking on Central. You're talking about Eastwood taking on Smithson Valley this past weekend. But still, Eastlake's doing what they're supposed to do, and that is take care of business against, what you might argue is inferior opponents. Now, Eastlake enters district play with all the momentum in the world. Senior quarterback Sebastian Rendon, over 700 passing yards on the season thus far, 9 total touchdowns. But, of course, it's Elijah Uribe, who was quiet this past weekend, 69 on the ground, 39 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I know that he's really the key to their success, one of the best players, if not the best player in all of 6A. Now, Eastlake's got Americas, Pebble Hills, and Franklin to start off in 6A, which is really interesting because that sets them up to take on Eastwood Friday, October 15th, followed by a game against Montwood Friday, October 22nd. Man, that month of October is going to be a lot of fun to watch in 6A, and particularly with the Eastlake Falcons, the way they've played recently.
And that's where we're really going to find out how real this Eastlake Falcon team is. And even before that Eastwood game, you look at the tough October, starting with Franklin. Franklin looked real good against Andrews last week, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But, that's kind of a murderer's row. When I look at right now who the top 3 teams going into the district schedule, you're looking at Franklin and Eastwood, to me, are right there along with Eastlake, and they play them back to back. And it seems certain, but the dates may be off here on their MAC prep schedule just a bit, or they have the wrong Franklin on here. That's what it is. They have the Franklin, Texas team from East Texas, but nonetheless, I mean, that is really going to tell us how good this Eastlake team is. And what's been impressive to me is, yes, the offensive numbers. We're seeing Sebastian Rendon really establish himself. He's completed 54% of his passes, exactly 700 yards passing, already 9 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. But on the defensive side, that's what's really been impressive. The way that they've been able to hold teams down and really suffocate them. Hector Hinojos, a guy that already has 3 sacks leads the team in tackles. He's a junior linebacker. This guy's a District 1-6A already, in my opinion, a 1-6A type of MVP type candidate already. He's been leading the way along with Jaime Guerrero, a senior defensive back. They have a really, really good front three that they run. They run that odd front with Caleb Emery off the edge. You also see Brandon Lita inside that defense. That's a really, really good defense, and that's, to me, what I'm more impressed, what I want to see them go up against those top teams. You talk about their offense, their system. I think they could put up yards against anybody. I really want to see how Eastlake's defense hangs in 1-6A, because you have some really good offenses, just like I saw last Friday with Franklin. And of course, everybody knows we talked about with Coach Julio Lopez a couple of weeks ago about their offense and their consistency. That's going to be a tough stretch for Eastlake. And if anybody, it's kind of interesting to see the way that Eastlake has been rolling. You going into week 1 against Americas, will the bye week affect them? That's really my question. As you look at early in the season when teams are rolling like Eastlake is it time for a bye week? Maybe a trap bye week here for Eastlake to open up district even against America. So very, very interesting team to watch. Like you mentioned, just as they go through as they go through their schedule and the competition rises, is this Eastlake team for real? That's going to be a big question. They've proven it so far, beating up on some really, really good 5A teams, not taking anything away from Eastlake. But, yeah, that competition gets tough, and that defense are going to get tested. But they passed every test with flying colors, especially the way that they handled a very, very athletic Parkland team last week.
We'll get back to 6A in just a little bit. I definitely want to get into it because there's Franklin to talk about. There's Montwood, of course, Eastwood. But let's talk a little 5A. And let's start with Parkland, who, Eastlake really killed this past weekend, 36-13. And for the Parkland Matadors and head coach Eric Franz, they find themselves in a very unfamiliar place that they've have not been in a long time, and that's 0-3. Are they the best 0-3 team in the city right now? El Dorado also 0-3. America's 0-3 right now. We've got, of course, Bowie, El Paso High 0-3. Are they the best 0-3 team right now, Alex?
I think so. At least at 5A, they're trying to figure it out at quarterback. They're trying to find that right mix. They have a young junior running back that obviously could, at the end of the season, be one of the top 5 backs in the city. They have another young receiver in Demarion Crest Daniels. This is a very, very young team that's going through some growing pains. And also, I want to credit Coach Franz. Parkland has been ridiculed the past, 4 or 5 seasons during this run, is because everybody said, oh, you play nobody. You're 10-0, 9-1 at the end of the season, whatever it is, and you go in the playoffs. And Parkland's won some playoff games, but that's really been the knock. Well, this year, there's no weak link in that schedule, so I actually credit this Parkland team for going out there and scheduling the way that they did. We're opening up against an Eastwood team that, they probably feel that they should have won that game. I feel maybe they should have won that game. Andrews handled them early on, but they were able to fight back in that game. And then, that Eastlake game, that score really was never close from what I was looking at. But this is going to make this team better. When you're talking about matching up against the Canotillos later in the season, and this is a playoff team, no doubt about it. But, these are good growing pain losses for this Parkland team. It's just going to make them better. Now, they may go into the playoffs 7-3, 6-4, but they're going to be a dangerous 7-3, 6-4 team, in the playoffs. But, I don't think there's any reason to worry yet for Parkland because they have the talent and they are going to be one of the top teams in their district. I just think this is a really, really good measuring stick to see how much how much this young Matador team has to grow. I think, come week 8, week 9 later in the season, I wouldn't want to play this Parkland team because it's going to pay dividends this rough early start in a sense, just because of their schedule has been very, very tough.
I know before the season started, a lot of talk was, can Eric Franz make it 4 in a row? Can he win the district title 4 straight times and really pry, the power, I guess the balance of powers away from a program like, Canutillo? Now, the Matadors do return 6 starters on both offense and defense, but you're right. When you're talking about most of their key players, they're like, they're skill players. It's a lot of newcomers on this Parkland team. I'll read off the next 3 games for you. Bowie, Del Valle, and then at El Dorado for Parkland. If they win 2 out of those 3, I think they're kind of back on track. And we kind of know, against the Conquistadores, that's going to be a big uphill battle for the Matadors.
Yeah, and it still shows of how tough that, Eric Franz is trying to schedule. He's scheduling up there in a sense, and that's going to be big for them going forward. Because you're looking at this Bowie game. Bowie's having an off year. That should be an easy win for Parkland. You're talking about getting back onto the winning track, and then having Del Valle at home. That's sort of like a you can look at that in a sense as like a preparation for district play to a non-district game that's going to have a lot riding on it. You're at home. Del Valle is going to be good. You're going to have to get up for that one. So I think from an emotional standpoint for Parkland, that's going to be a really good game for them to really just kind of get the juices going right before district play with that Del Valle game. That's going to tell us a lot. That's really going to tell us at the midpoint of the season how much this young team has grown. Not maybe so much from an X's and O's scheme, but just maybe from a maturity standpoint of how they can go out there and really handle some early season adversity, some adversity that's coming their way. Taking out Bowie this week and then coming, having to bounce back and play a really good Del Valle team. That's at the midway point right before district play, and that's going to be a good turning point for this young team. And just like you said, that may answer that question if Coach Eric Franz can get this team, back to their winning ways right before district play starts and have some resounding wins. I know they would like to beat Del Valle, and have that confidence going into district play. So that's going to be a very interesting an interesting stretch of their tough non-district schedule before they hit that district play.
Let's stick in 2-5A. Canutillo's 2-1 on the season. They are coming off a pretty easy victory against Chapin, where LJ Martin, their star tailback, rushed for 112 yards. He had a touchdown on the ground. He's totaled 449 on the ground this year with 5 total touchdowns. Quarterback Devin Granados, he's also pretty strong for this group. 8 total touchdowns this year. Had a $171 against Chapin. 3 passing touchdowns against Chapin. I like that as well. What's your impressions on this Canutillo Eagles team so far, Alex?
I watched a little film mainly on their defense because I'm going to be covering their game against Del Valle this weekend. And this is just your typical Canutillo defense, their odd front. They can go odd. They can go an even front with you. Their backers are just fast like normal. Nothing's changed from that Del Valle defense. That's what I've seen from them. And, of course, you throw in that talented kid, LJ Martin. One of the backers that really stood out to me on film was Jesus Carrillo. He feels just like a Canutillo defense does. Their front 3, their front 4, however they line up against you because they can go multiple. They fill up the gaps. They crash those gaps, and their linebackers just come right behind and fill and tackle well. That's what I see when I look at this Canutillo defense. And obviously, you're looking at their start of their season. They've had a really tough schedule as well. Holding off a good Burgess team, kind of fell apart against Eastlake with Eastlake's speed. But now they have an opportunity. And the way that they handled a good Chapin team, with Chapin has some issues on their offensive line, to see Canutillo sort of expose that by holding them to 13 points. That was a big confidence win, I think, for Canutillo heading into this Del Valle game, which in turn is going to tell us a lot about this Canutillo team. I think if you see Canutillo, either hang with Del Valle, which I think they're going to give Del Valle all they can handle. This is going to be a really close game, or beat Del Valle. I think they're the clear-on favorites. Parkland's got to prove that. But to me, their defense is really what's going to be key. And I know they lost some guys. I'm interested to talk with Coach Brooks to see how many of their guys got back. I know week 1 they lost a few defensive starters. But, just seeing what they do as far as their team defense, and then the way that LJ Martin is out here just doing what we expected him to do, preseason, averaging 149 yards a game, 6.4 yards per carry. He's going to be a big part of what they're going to do. And then obviously the quarterback, Devin Granados, he's a playmaker. That's something that always adds intrigue to what Canutillo does on offense. That they have somebody that can run that breed option and be a kind of a nice little change of pace to their main back with LJ Martin. I think Devin Granados, keeping him healthy is also a key. But it's going to be a big test for them against Del Valle to see if their defense is up there, to be able to stop an elite runner, like Christian Martinez is for Del Valle.
Let's talk Del Valle. They are easily the clear favorites to win Super 5A right now. Chapin, Bel Air, El Dorado seem far step behind them in terms of talent, in terms of just how the program is structured. And what the Conquistadores have shown me through 3 games is this team is tough. I don't know what the kind of preseason chatter was about this group, just, and where they would stack up in this district. But man, Del Valle has proved that they are out and they want to win this district title in a big way. I was looking at the stats this past weekend because America's hung in with them. It was a very close game until Del Valle was able to, take control of it toward the end of this one, put it away, and Del Valle comes out with a 49-36 victory. America's with a couple late touchdowns to make it close. But I was, of course, I've been very impressed with their tailback, Christian Martinez, 484 on the ground this year, 65 carries. He's had 4 total touchdowns on the year. And then the progression at quarterback from Jesse Ramos. I mean, this junior gunslinger, he goes from throwing 35 yards against Coronado, looked like he was way too nervous, maybe looked a little unprepared for that opener, but then he settles into himself against Pebble Hills, throws 135 and 2 touchdowns. But Alex, this past weekend, he throws for 278, 5 passing touchdowns, has a rushing touchdown on the ground for the Conquistadores against Americas. I mean, back-to-back victories over 6A teams for Del Valle. Now they go up against the toughest stretch yet. I mean, they go up against Canutillo on the road, then they've got Parkland on the road in back-to-back weeks. I love it for Del Valle, who's off to a great start.
Yeah, that's kudos to head coach Rudy Contreras for really getting this team going early on in the season. You mentioned Jesse Ramos, a guy that's just, to me, a perfect fit for that balanced offense. You're looking at his passing numbers, Del Valle wants to run the ball. So what they're getting out of him is efficient quarterback play, completing 62% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He doesn't turn the ball over. That is key. And then he can move around a little bit. He averages 5.5 yards per rush, and he's also run for 3 touchdowns. That adds to the dynamic ability of Christian Martinez, who you mentioned. He's averaging 161 yards per game, has gone for over 100 yards in each of his first 3 games. And, oh, by the way, Del Valle's defense has also taken away, has recorded 3 takeaways in the first 3 games as well. So you're seeing it come from both sides of the ball for Del Valle. And not only that, but it seems like they have a little receiving core that they're not just relying on 1 or 2 receivers. When you look at their numbers, they have 2 or 3 guys that can go out there and catch the ball and be consistent and make plays. And I think that's what's going to be key for Del Valle, keeping their offense as multiple as possible. And I think that's a credit to Rudy Contreras really developing his group of guys, and we're starting to see that manifest itself. Now, obviously, district play, for them, district's easy for them. I'm just going to keep it real. Let's just be real. You're looking at how teams have started so far, in that district play. They're the clear-cut favorites. So for Del Valle, the next couple of weeks, it's about staying healthy, continuing to grow, and continue to develop your playmakers. But this week, honestly, in my opinion, this may be their toughest game. I know they have that El Centro team on the road that they're paying back, that came into play.
That's right.
For, I believe it was South Point that they were supposed to play that year. South Point canceled out, so they're able to pick up Central to come in. So besides that Central game, this Canutillo game, and of course Parkland, back-to-back weeks, big test for Del Valle, obviously on the road as well. Del Valle, this is going to be another one of those weeks where they've already proved themselves. This next 2 weeks is proving themselves as, okay, is this a team that can go out there and again defeat somebody on the road in the playoffs? I think they can. These next 2 weeks are going to tell us how good they can be as far as their playoff prognostications, because they're clearly the best team in Division 115A.
El Central. I didn't think we'd get an update from them. I love it. 1-3 on the season. I love that mention right there. And I totally forgot about this game, that they're going to be paying them back. Alex, good call there.
It's hiding on their schedule in there.
Yeah, it's funny. It's buried in there. Let's shift to 5A, 1-5A, because I know you saw 2 of these, the 2 of these affiliates in this district this past weekend. You saw Burgess, you saw Andress. Give me the takeaways from those 2 teams without revealing too much on Montwood and Franklin, and tell us what you know about those 2 teams early on into the season.
Starting with Burgess, Burgess really was sort of exposed as far as their youth at quarterback. Montwood's defensive line really, really dug in, and they were pressuring Andy Rutledge all night long. Their front seven was giving Burgess's offensive line fits. They really couldn't get Tavares Jones going. I think I had him at 187 or something like that, but 90 of those came on a hook and ladder play at the end. So I think they gave it to him passing wise as far as that stat. But Burgess only statted him with 77 yards, which is what I had. He did run for a 90-yard hook and ladder, so they really kept him in a bottle. And Burgess has to find different ways to get their playmakers the ball. That's really going to be a key for Burgess. Their offensive line does sort of worry me, but I still think they're the second best team in that district. Them and Austin, that's going to be a really good game. But they have some talent there with Sean Street. I really like Adam Sierra. He's a sure-handed receiver as well. And then Ray Campos is another receiver that I think can really help them out. But they got to figure out a way to sort of give Rutledge a little bit of time, whether it's sprint outs. I know they like to run that two-back cross set. There may be some play action that they may want to run and get him out of the pocket a little bit. I think it was a learning curve, really for both teams. Even looking at Andrus of how well that they played in the second quarter of that game, where they were down 20-7, and it looked like Franklin was going to run away with it, and Andrus was able to take the lead 21-20. But right before the half, their defense splintered, and Franklin went down the field, scored, and took a 27-21 lead into half, and Andrus just could never recover. But I think for Andrus, it's more of a motivation thing. This team started off really flat. There was, not even joking, there was 7 defensive offside penalties called by the Andrus defense.
Gosh.
So it was really a lack of focus in this game because Andrus, there was a 41-21 game. But if you look at it, and obviously Franklin dominated the statistics, but it was really a close game just because, and it wasn't close on the scoreboard because Andrus really bit themselves, with those penalties. They shot themselves in the foot time and time again, particularly on third down, where it was 3rd and 9, they jump offside, and all of a sudden Franklin would have a 3rd down and 4. That was really more of a focused thing for Andrus. So it was a wake-up call. I really, really think that this is a loss that maybe this Andrus team sort of needed to sort of ground them. They played 2 really tough games to start off the season, dominated Chapin, dominated Parkland for about, what I would say, about 35 minutes of that game. And then, like I said, they were able to fight back against Franklin. But really, for me, it's a good loss for Andrus to really kind of sit back and look at their team, look at where they need to go. And it's really a focus thing and an energy thing for Andrus. When they're focused and bringing the energy, they're one of the toughest teams to beat in town, like they always are. So it's a good, humbling loss for Andrus before a long district play starts, where they're open up against Bowie. But still impressive numbers that, you're looking at impressive with Andrus is personnel. Malachi Doe, Malcolm Anderson, clearly the favorite out of in 2-5A D2. But yeah, between the years, that's where you're going to see how good this Andrus team could be. And I think this is a good loss for Coach Taylor to really go back and humble the team. Go into the bye week, get some guys healthy, and come on, getting ready for district play there.
I'm thrilled about this district. There are teams that are dark horse candidates to try to win the district title, and a lot is on the line. Let's just throw it out there also, Alex. I mean, Burgess wants to make the stake and say, hey, we've won 3 consecutive district titles, although last year was a share with the Andrus Eagles. And Andrus wants to say, hey, we went back-to-back, and we did it with a new head coaching staff. You have Austin, who, is defying all odds right now. Jaden Wilson on the ground and as a linebacker. He has 317 total yards on the ground, 24 tackles, leads that Austin Panthers team in that smash mouth football style that they play under head coach Eric Pichardo. The Irvin Rockets, how about John Knutson? He's got 849 through the air, 8 passing touchdowns. He's got 4 picks, but it looks like a true gunslinger for the Rockets. I've really liked what I've seen from him. And then, of course, it all goes to the 3-0 Jefferson Silver Foxes. Nathan Alcala.
Repeat that. Repeat that again.
3-0 Jefferson Silver Foxes. Isn't that crazy, Alex? Quarterback Nathan Alcala, 587 through the air, 8 passing touchdowns, 14 total. Can they win this district, Alex? Let me throw it at you. Can they win this district?
You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. They're a playoff team. They are a playoff team. Now, can they win district? Let me tell you what. Their schedule sets up in a way where they play Andrus the last week of the season. They control that destiny. They control that destiny, does Jefferson. Now, this is an experienced team. Nathan Acala, Arturo Rubio, I remember talking to those guys when they were young sophomores and they were making little ends. They were starting to put up yards, getting some wins, putting up some points. Well, now they're seniors, and this is paying dividends. So, to me, I don't know if they're a district title contender yet. I think they're a playoff team, but like I mentioned, the way their schedule sets up, that last game on the season sets up November 5th. They're at Andress. They could control their own destiny to put themselves in a position to be district title contenders. Starts off with beating Burgess. That's going to be a tough one. You open up with that one in 2 weeks. That's really, I would think that's the start of the run there. If you beat Burgess and you're Jefferson, you set yourself up to really control your own destiny the rest of the way, because you play Irvin, which is going to be tough. You play El Paso, which having a down year. Obviously, Austin's tough too. But like I mentioned, the district title to me in this district runs through Andress. And if you're Jefferson, you don't play them till the end. So that sort of advantage Jeff in a sense, but you're looking at the excitement of the Jefferson Silver Foxes overall. Couldn't be more excited for Coach Martinez and that staff, who's really, really done just a heck of a job of turning this thing around. And like I mentioned, this is not something that's really an overnight sensation, if you will, for Jefferson. This team has been growing over the past 3 years, and really going back to, we want to go back to 2017 when Arturo Rubio's brother, Jose Rubio, they broke their playoff streak. So this is a long time coming for Jeff to really break out of really been, some tough losing seasons. And I'm looking it up here. The last time Jefferson was 500 or better, you got to go back to 2007 when they went 5-5. So they have a chance to break some 14-year history. And then going back a little bit even deeper, they haven't had a winning record since 2005. So this is definitely some unfamiliar territory for the Foxes, but so glad that they're able to continue their run that they've had over the past couple of years with Coach Martinez. And I think this year's the year that you'll see a Jefferson team finish above 500 for sure.
Man, you're going to need to cool me off after that one. I got too excited off Jefferson. Let's talk some 6A. Let's shift back over there, and we'll talk about those two teams that you watched over the weekend as well. Montwood, as they defeated Burgess this past weekend, 29-13. The Franklin Cougars, who get their first victory of the year, 41-21 against Andress. I got two questions for you for both these games. First off, with Yamil Oaxaca, is he the best wide receiver in the city right now? And then for Franklin, do they need their powerful running back in Stephen Powers? Do they still need him moving forward? What were your assessments on both teams for Montwood and Franklin, Alex?
Looking at Montwood, I mean, Oaxaca's the real deal. Just affects the game in a lot of different ways. You have to account for him. It was funny because I was after the end of the game, I went down to the field and kind of was around the handshake with both teams. And, Burgess guys were like, where's Yamo at? Where's Yamo at? Every team, whether it's the beginning of the game, the end of the game, they're trying to identify number 2 from Montwood. So he's a big player, had another 100-yard games. I think I had him like at 107, 9 catches, 100, another touchdown in that game. He's the real deal. But, for Montwood, they got to develop some other weapons. I know Diego's been out, his brother Diego Oaxaca. That's going to be a big key for Montwood as far as their offense is developing weapons outside of Yamil Oaxaca, because there's going to be some teams that are going to bracket them. They're going to bring help. They're going to double team. They're going to bring that safety over the top. They're going to do things to try to take him away. So for Coach, Coach Fama, he used that offensive staff. I know they hired Coach Stella, that was over there at El Dorado.
That's right.
They're going to have to get real creative as far as what they're going to do offensively. I like that running back, Isaiah Claudio. You can tell he's a little young as far as his decision making, as a runner, but he's really explosive as well. I think he's going to develop well as the season goes along. But yeah, Yamil is the real deal. I just think they got to find some other weapons around him, and they have some bodies there. They have some athletes. I know Diego Oaxaca was in a sling, so hopefully that's not too much of a prolonged injury, and they get him back, because I know he makes a big difference. They can move him all around their offense just like they do Yamil. But yeah, I was more impressed though with Montwood's defense. Their front seven looked very, very good against, a pretty tough to prepare for Burgess defense. And Ivan Rangel went over there he went from Del Valle to Hanks to Montwood. So that hire's starting to pay dividends. Want to shout out Caleb Montes, the middle linebacker, had a big interception in that game, leads the team in tackles. He's a very, very talented part of that defense, experienced player. He's a senior. He's a big part of what they did against Burgess last week. So, that's going to be an interesting team to watch grow. To your Franklin question, question, with Stephen Powers being out, as far as what I'm looking at, as far as their team overall, I think where they're going to need Stephen Powers is more on that defensive side. You're looking at Shea Smith, who to me is more built as a safety. They had him in the box playing linebacker last week.
No way.
That's going to be interesting to see. They need him for depth. And in my opinion, they really need him for depth. Talking with the coaches, it is an injury. They're hoping that he's back in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, they're really, really going to need him. I think more on the defensive side than anything. And I got to talk about Cameron Bird, man. I mean, what a performance by Cameron Bird. 4 touchdown passes in the first half last week. You can just see the experience factor that he has. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Oh, and by the way, Miles McWhorter, he's real, bro. He is real. I had him. I guess I shorted some of his stats from last week. Franklin had him at 150. I had him at about 100, but the guy runs hard. He is as talented as they come. He's a tough runner, and really, he was a workhorse. 28 carries last week, and he only had about 3 minus rushes, or big minus rushes, but only 3 of them. He's going to be a big factor. They have him for 150 and a touchdown. And also 4 catches, 67 yards. Took a nice little swing pass with about 4 seconds left, and then goes into the end zone and scores right before the half against Andress. I mean, just total playmaker. And you know what? You can tell that team was hungry. They wanted to get that win. They had played 2 really good teams and came up just short, or really came up short to the Rio Rancho team in game 1. I know they lost pretty there was a gap in the score against Midland Christian, but 2 tough teams that really got Franklin ready against Andress, and you can tell they're ready. And Cameron Bird, to me, in my opinion, here's a hot take. He's the best quarterback in the city right now, best passing quarterback that I've seen in the city. I mean, his decision-making, some of the throws that he was making against a very good, very lengthy and athletic Andress secondary. I mean, this guy, there's a reason why he's completing 65% of his passes, and I think he's going to continue to grow. And not only that, but they have they have a cachet of receivers. I like what I saw out of that receiving core. Bo Sparks is consistent. Franco Hernandez had 2 touchdown catches. One was a long one. McWhorter out of the backfield. Dominic Hernandez was also reliable. And then they have another Dominic in there, Dominic Ariano. There was a point in the first half where Bird completed 6 different completions to 6 different receivers. That's what shows me as good as he can be. Not only that, he was making plays on third down, which to me gives him that distinction as the best passing quarterback that I've seen so far in the city. And I think he's just going to continue to get better. This is a guy that's played over the past couple years, Adrian, as you know. So Franklin is a team to watch out for, not only offensively, but once they get Stephen Powers back on that defensive side, I mean, that's going to make a very, very big improvement to not only the talent that they already have there, but of course we know what he brings to the table and his talent, of course, an all-state wrestler as well.
To put it in perspective, is he better than Danny Walther, who was the Franklin Cougars quarterback, I believe, in 2019? It was his senior year. Was he better than him?
I think he's a better short passer when you're talking about those West Coast concepts, the out routes, the hitches. Cameron Bird just kind of has that clock and that timing down. Walther was a really good quarterback as far as stretching the field. Walther could thread it on that deep post to the Gabe Stonewalls of the world and those receivers that he had. I think Cameron Bird fits this more West Coast type style where, I think I had him 22 of 24. Let me see where Franklin had him last week. But, that's the type of guy. He was 22 of 23. I guess I missed an incompletion or discredited him or gave him an extra one. But, I mean, when you look at that, and they were throwing the ball, like I said, it wasn't like short little hitches. These were about 7-8 yard routes, and that was most impressive, that he was throwing dimes out there and able to move the ball on third down. So I think Cameron Bird has sort of surpassed that type of expectation of being the best quarterback in the city as the season goes on. And he's got some stiff competition. You're talking about Andrew Martinez, who we talked to his head coach last week. But Cameron Bird to me just looked very, very comfortable. And you look at his numbers over the past couple of weeks too, 315 against Cleveland, 213, almost completed 60% of his passes against a really good Midland Christian defense I've actually saw. He's just going to continue to get better, and I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in that district, and that's a good district for quarterbacks indeed.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Let's talk about the playoffs, because this district, you told me you had it ready. You have it down as far as your top 4 teams in this, or who will make the playoffs. Let's hear it, Alex. I'll give you my list right after yours, and then we'll break it down.
I think you look at the top, obviously, right now, Eastlake and Eastwood, they're 1A, 1B. Obviously, Eastlake will take the nod for the 3-0 record. But if you're an Eastwood fan, you're going to scream at me, well, Eastlake ain't played nobody, Paul. But, well, you know what? Hey, y'all going to play soon, October 15th. I already got that afternoon off. That's going to be the one. That's going to be the separator of the 1A, 1B between Eastwood and Eastlake. You watching Franklin, I think Franklin's that third team in there. I think Franklin is going to continue to get better. Obviously, Coach Walker is hoping to return in the next couple of weeks. Getting Stephen Powers back is going to help. I talked about their offense. I think they're going to, now that they've played those two tough out-of-town opponents. They played Andress tough. They were able to beat Andress. What they probably feel handily, which they did really in the second half, held Andress to just 54 total yards of offense after Andress had 204 in the first half. I think Franklin is really etching that third spot. Now, they can, with those matchups against Eastlake and Eastwood, they can climb themselves into that district contender title, but we'll get to that when we get there. But they do have that potential in those matchups against your Eastlakes or Eastwoods. And then, right now, obviously, there's still a lot of football to be played, but I think you can pencil in an M on Montwood for that fourth playoff spot, but I wouldn't discredit Pebble Hills or Americas as the season goes along. I think Pebble Hills obviously is very young with their young quarterback, Gael Ochoa. Obviously Americas is young with their young with their young crew that they're trying to usher in. They can possibly challenge Montwood for that fourth playoff spot, but right now, if the season ends today and I had to pick 4 playoff teams, it would be Eastlake, Eastwood, Montwood. I skipped Franklin. Franklin would be my number 3, and then Montwood. But like I mentioned, I don't want to sleep on Pebble Hills yet. I don't want to sleep on Americas yet. Those are 2 teams that, over the years, as we looked at Adrian, 1-6A is known for those wild upsets on those random Fridays where we don't expect anything to happen. And all of a sudden, everything goes haywire. I could see Americas and Pebble Hills playing spoiler to one of those top teams. So, that's how I look at it as far as right now. What do you got as far as those teams that are kind of poking their playoff heads per se?
Yeah, I've got the same 1 and 2. I've got Eastlake 1. I've got Eastwood 2. I've got Montwood at 3, and then Franklin coming in at 4. Here's my argument against Americas and Pebble Hills. I feel like for Americas, they're just a year or 2 away. They've got so many young pieces on their team. I like what they're doing, and I agree with you. I think they play spoiler in some of these games. I feel like they could either upset Eastlake in that first game coming out of 6A. They could take a game from Franklin or maybe from Montwood and play spoiler to one of those teams. For Pebble Hills, man, I just don't know if they're there yet. And it's a little unfortunate because I know the turnover's high there. I know that they're really trying to get things going, and I know that they want to get back into the playoffs with that head coaching staff. I really like Mark Torres. I think he's a great person. I just don't know about this team, Alex. They're kind of young, and then we've had this discussion with Pebble Hills over the years, like, oh, they're kind of young, and then over the offseason, unfortunately, they'll lose a couple guys, not to any problem of their own, but they get a lot of military guys. They pull a lot of that military family audience over at Pebble Hills. So I'm not sure about them. And of course, I'm pretty confident that Eastlake, Eastwood will be 1A, 1B. My question is, what if we see one of these teams have 2 losses in their column, especially when it comes to district play? Like, what if district play is just an absolute gauntlet to try to get to the top seed overall?
And that's what could happen when you're talking about Eastlake, Eastwood, Franklin, and even Montwood. If Montwood's defense can stay healthy and continue to get better, you're talking about those 3 teams really or those 4 teams sort of beating up on each other. Like, and it's happened. That's 1-6A is known statewide to have some parity throughout. And I think that's what you can see in that October 15th matchup between Eastlake and Eastwood. That could dictate it, because the other team, one of those teams is going to have a 1-game lead on the other best team on the district. And, but again, that puts a target on your back. You know what I mean? When you're able to go out there and pick up one of those marquee wins of the season. So, it is going to be wide open. I do kind of see that. I think we can see a district champion with 1 loss, maybe even 2, because of as good as Franklin can be and as good as Montwood's defenses could be when you're talking about, matching up. That's really a big key when you're talking about defense, talking about district play. play, okay, who can match up with who? Franklin right now, I think their offense can match up with anybody in that district. Say in Eastlake and Eastwood could probably say the same, but Kenna Mott would say that. Kenna Pebble Hills say that. That's going to be the difference. Those different matchups, already, we're pitting this Eastlake matchup, as far as they're both offenses. But right now, Eastlake may have the better defense, but is it because they haven't played a caliber of team offensively as Eastwood? That's really what I look at when I talk about prognostics and looking at playoff teams and potential district championships. There's some very interesting matchups. And hey, are we gonna hype up Socorro coming into this, or is Socorro gonna get in this?
Yes.
Too? I mean, there's a lot of people that think that Socorro is a team that's improved. I think they're gonna give teams trouble. But from top to bottom, obviously Coronado is clearly having a down year. They've only scored 14 points in their first 3 games so far. But, really those top teams, it is going to be a gauntlet. And I would not be surprised, like I said, to see a 1-6A district champion with either 1 or 2 losses, because, it seems to be at the top until somebody beats somebody or somebody gets on a roll. That's how I see it. I think it's going to be a very, very tight race each week between Eastlake, Eastwood, Franklin, and on the outside looking in, Montwood too. You can't discredit them, even though, like I said, they got to develop a little bit more weapons on offense. Talking about those matchups that we're talking about, but I really like where we're at going with Eastwood, Eastlake, and like I said, Franklin. Man, I was impressed with Miles McWhorter, and if they get Stephen Powers back, that's a team that's gonna have a say in the district title. I think they're gonna play all those top teams very, very tough this year.
Turning the page, looking over to next week, just 2 games to really highlight. A lot of teams off next week because of the bye week. First game, I want to get your predictions from this one, Alex. Ysleta Jefferson. Great matchup for this week. And this will be week 4 here in the El Paso Texas high school football scene. Ysleta taking on Jefferson. Who you got in this one, Alex?
I'm going to take the Foxes, and this is why. And this is a credit to Coach Tony Martinez. I think, in my opinion, that the Jefferson Silver Foxes have learned to win ball games. That's a big process, man. Growing a program, you're talking about going on the road in back-to-back weeks to start off the season, beating Alpine on the road. I don't care what division Alpine is. You got to go on the road and beat a team the way that they beat Alpine. Then you go on the road and beat Sanelli. I know Sanelli's down, but again, you have to go on the road and do that. And then at home, beating a team, Bel Air, who's in a higher district than you as far as enrollment, and you beat them pretty handily. I think it's safe to say this group of Jefferson Silver Foxes has learned to win. Now, looking at Ysleta's side of it, that's a tough loss to bounce back with. I know that they probably took that one hard. I know that was a rivalry game that took a lot out of them. Jefferson's at home again, so I like the Foxes at home. I think it's going to be a very, very close game. But, like I mentioned, my whole thing about Jefferson this year is this team knows how to win. I'm not going to get technical with what they do on offense. They have a versatile offense. They can throw the ball with you with Alcala. Alcala can run the ball over. They can hand it to Arturo Rubio. Their defense depth is going to be a problem for them later on in district play, but right now it doesn't seem like it's a problem at all. I mean, that defense is playing very, very well. I think every loss Jefferson or every win Jefferson's going to have this year, we're going to label it as an upset. But I think in that locker room, those guys expect to win. They know how to win. And I think we're going to see another quote-unquote upset this week. Could be another shootout, but I think I'll take the Foxes on this one. That Coach Martinez has them boys in the South Side rolling. Do the South Side.
Yes, that's right. I'm going with you. I'm going with the Foxes. I think they win this one against Ysleta, and I think it's going to be a close game. I think Ysleta, if what we saw from last week in that Riverside loss is that they'll hang with you, they'll hang with teams. This one will be a very competitive matchup. I like Jefferson in a close one. And then the game of the week, you'll be at this one, Del Valle versus Cañetillo. We alluded to it earlier here on the podcast, but who you got in this one, Alex?
Man, this the old 2-5A rivalry, Del Valle and Cañetillo. I'm going to go with Del Valle in this one, but it's going to be a slobber knocker. This is going to be just like it always is when Del Valle and Cañetillo would battle it out for that district title or the playoff positioning when Coach Morales was there. It could be a high-scoring game, but I think both defenses will step up. It's going to be obviously 2 very talented tailbacks going at it. But I think edge Del Valle just because of the edge they've played with so far this year. year. But, hey, anything can happen on the blue turf out there, man. So, but I really think it's going to be a close game. This one's hard to pick. I'll take Del Valle with the star power with Christian Martinez and that quarterback that's impressive, that's been improving as well. But, that's a tougher one to pick, but I'll give it to Del Valle. I'm excited for that one. Wouldn't be surprised, though, if Canutillo comes out and pulls that one out, especially in a close game. That's just going to make both teams better. That's why you schedule those games. So shout out to Coach Brooks and Coach Contreras. Going to be an entertaining one out there on the far west side on the blue turf over there at Canutillo.
I'm taking Canutillo in this one. I'm just trying to be a little different. Here's the case why. The Eagles beat Burgess in week 1, 29-22. And if you really look at that one, with the exception of the fourth quarter, they handled the Mustangs. I feel like Canutillo's able to do things like that with their talented running back in LJ Martin, with their quarterback, Devin Granados, who doesn't really make a lot of mistakes when he throws the ball, and 8 total touchdowns this year. Plus, Canutillo's defense has been improving week after week. They've been impressive, even though they're younger than we've seen in years past. I'm just going to take the Eagles in this one as an upset pick. I really think you got to look at Del Valle as the clear favorites to go into this one. But on that blue turf, why not? I'll take Canutillo. I'll ride with them in this game. It'll be a fun one. I'm really thrilled about this one, Alex.
Yeah, this is going to be a really good game. Like you said, a lot of teams off. All the 6As are off. Most of the 2-5A D2s are off in town. So this is all eyes are going to be on this game. And, like we mentioned for Del Valle, when I look at Del Valle, this is going to be a game as far as, how good is this team going to be in the playoffs as far as winning against an out-of-town team, something they haven't had trouble doing over the past couple of years. But this could solidify that, to say, you go on the road and you handle Canutillo, or even if you beat Canutillo, who's a good team, that's what's going to show for Del Valle. For Canutillo, like I mentioned earlier, if Canutillo is able to knock off Del Valle, to me, they are the clear favorites in 1-5A D2. Now, I know Parkland is there, and Parkland deserves that credit, for winning, 3 straight district titles. But, Parkland right now is trying to find themselves, like we mentioned. So this is an identity finder game, I think, for each team. Whoever comes out of this is going to roll into district play and possibly roll into the playoffs with a big win on their shoulder and something to hold themselves onto. Because, like I mentioned, this is going to be a physical game. This is a game that's going to be really a chess match. When we look at what Canutillo did going back to that Burgess game, where they would put 8-9 in the box, with Burgess early on in the game, and then they would switch it up and go with that odd mat front, bring their backers up a little bit. Sometimes there was some different formations where they were bringing their backers back. Coach Contreras and Coach Brooks, and their staffs, they're going to go at it as far as how to stop those running backs, how to stop, the play action passes, how to stop the read option, things that both of these teams know what they do already. Very familiar. There's no tricks in the bag that either team's going to pull out. Both these teams know each other well. It's going to be about that execution, and it's going to be about those adjustments. And that's what makes this matchup very, very interesting to me. And, that press box over there and Canutillo is very, very nice too. I'm looking forward to that.
There you go, Alex. Hey, man, great work as always, week after week. You can follow Alex on Twitter at NicholasAlex915. Check out his recaps up on our website, 600ESPNElPaso.com. When we do our our weekly recaps, you can check those out. Plus, when we do our week previews, you can check out his Thursday night recaps as well. For Alex Nicolas, I'm Adrian Broaddus saying so long. Thanks for listening. Alex, I really appreciate it, man. Thanks as always for doing what you do, and we'll be back next week. All right, man?
Hey, no problem. Go Rams. We're all Ram fans tonight, man.
That's right. Rams taking on the Bears. That's going to be a big win for the Rams. I like it. Hey, Alex, appreciate it again as always, man.
All right, man. We'll talk to y'all next week.